Now, if you've been following this pretty closely, you might be wondering what would happen if we would take the whole steps and half steps from the key of C and try to play the Twinkle Twinkle Little Star melody starting on the keynote D. If you do that, you wind up getting something like a minor scale. Now listen to the D minor scale, 1st through 5th, as opposed to the D major scale, 1st through 5th. This scale tends to sound more confident. This one sounds a little more serious. So if I were to play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star with this scale, I would have this. You can hear the difference. And the difference that you're hearing is a difference that we term mode or modality. I can play in the key of D major, or I can play in the key of D minor. Each has a different sound, and it has to do with the whole steps, half step relationships within the scales. Generally, major keys, I'll switch back to C here for a second. Generally, major keys sound more confident. Very often they're explained to very young children as being the happy keys, and minor keys as being the sad keys. If you listen to a C major chord, for instance, it perhaps sounds a little more confident than a C minor chord. But the reason for that is because this interval, our ears perceive this interval as less dissonant than this interval. This interval has more tension in it. And so this sound is a little more challenging to our ears than this sound. If I'm playing in a major key, and I'll just use the same chords as Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, I'll have chords that sound like this. Okay? If I'm playing in a minor key, in the same C key, but this time not C major, but this time C minor, the only essential difference, by the way, the one thing that really makes the difference between the minor and the major keys is this half step right here, the distance between, okay, whole step, half, instead of whole step, as we would have in the major key. Notice the only difference, I'm just shifting my finger that much. C major, C minor. Okay, so when I'm playing in a C minor key, I have chords that sound more like this. And so the resulting harmony and the resulting mode of the harmony and the mode of the scale is different in terms of the way we perceive it. The chords have more tension in them, and the scale that we hear has a different whole step, half step relationship, which means a lot emotionally, because music in the minor mode tends to sound more serious. Some would say more depressing in some cases, but definitely much more serious. Sometimes, if you take a minor scale and you couple it with a very fast melody and kind of a playful accompaniment, especially an accompaniment that might go something like something like that, that kind of accompaniment with the minor scale can make the music sound sort of playful, but still more serious than if you used the same accompaniment with a major scale. Okay, more on that later. Right now I'd like to move on to something referred to in music as a cadence. A cadence is kind of like musical punctuation. In language, we have periods and commas and exclamation points and question marks and all sorts of things at the end of sentences that help to create thoughts. Think about it this way. If we make a statement that we know to be fact, we normally end with a period, and we end that statement when we speak by inflecting the end of the statement down. You hear that? Inflection downward. When we ask a question, we tend to inflect the end of the statement upwards. Like if I'm asking the question, do you understand cadences? You see what I mean? Cadences and upward inflection. In music, that same kind of inflection can be attained through cadences. Let's think about the key of C for just a second. Here we have the C major chord. We're going to play in the key of C. This is our 1 chord, our tonic chord. When I move to the dominant chord, if I move to this chord, that's the key, that's the chord built on the 5th degree of the scale. It's got a lot of tension in it because I'm adding the 7th as well. Don't worry too much about that, but I'm adding a tension that's natural to the chord. That chord has tension and it wants to resolve back to the key. We don't want to end here, in other words. That would be like a question mark, and it needs to get an answer. And so if I'm playing along in a key, in the key of C, okay, I have my 1 chord, then I go to my 5 chord, my dominant chord, and if I just left it there, that would sound like a question mark. That's called a half cadence. When I make that into a complete cadence, I do it by going back to the 1 chord. And now we're back at rest. Complete cadences are a way to resolve musical tensions so that we get back to rest. Now, what are musical tensions? Well, between any 2 notes, as we've discussed before, you can have something called a harmonic interval. This is a very pleasing one. This is a 5th. This one is also pleasing. This is a 4th. Again, this one is pleasing, although less consonant than a 4th and a 5th. Consonant meaning, as you've probably discovered through the video that we have watched already, consonant means pleasing to our ears, and dissonant means displeasing. So this one's consonant. This is less consonant. This is less consonant yet. We don't like this one, but we especially don't like this one. Okay? Each one of those represents a different degree of tension. All music has both consonants and dissonance. Consonant intervals and dissonant intervals. All music has it. And so if you were to try to listen to a piece of music that only had consonant intervals in it, you would be extremely bored. In fact, as Frank Zappa said, and this is a quote, "The creation and destruction of harmonic and statistical tensions is essential to the maintenance of compositional drama. Any composition or improvisation which remains consistent and regular throughout it is, for me, equivalent to watching a movie with only good guys in it, or eating cottage cheese." In other words, you don't want, in music, nothing but consonant intervals because the music's very boring. And so there's a mixture of intervals that are very pleasant and intervals which are not so pleasant. It's the resolution of these intervals, the ones that are not so pleasant to us, to intervals that are rather pleasant, consonant, is what we're talking about when we're talking about resolution of dissonance, or in this discussion we're calling it cadence structure. So if I've got 1 chord, my tonic chord, and I move to a 5 chord, I've got this interval, okay, but I've also got this other interval here, which is not so pleasant. We want to resolve that, and this one wants to resolve here. Hear that? Okay. Dissonance to consonance. And so when I play this, like that, I've got a resolution of dissonance to consonance. And in this case, it's 5. Whoops. Sorry, I'm going to play the right chord. To 1.